The city of Rochester, New York has fined a landlord $131 million for code violations at his property, even though his properties are only worth $1.2 million. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting story for you today, and it's coming out of Rochester, New York. And it has to do with code violations that they sent to this landlord that have continued to accumulate all the way up to the point where now this landlord supposedly owes $131 million to the city. Okay? Now, talk about absolutely ridiculous. This is the problem with all these cities when they put these laws in place for code violations where the fines will just continue to accumulate. Well, you know what? Now the fine is actually worth substantially more than the properties themselves are worth, right? And the landlord has no ability to pay these fines. Okay, a lot of these properties where these code violations occurred, they're sitting empty. The landlord is in financial distress right now, and he's like, "Yeah, whatever. I'm not paying these fines. You go ahead, take the properties because they need to be torn down." That's what this landlord is saying. So, I'm not defending the landlord right now in this story. This is one of the few cases where I won't be defending the landlord, but I did want to point out the ridiculousness of city policy where these kind of fines continue to accumulate, okay? It just makes it so that these ridiculous numbers come up and it can put you in even worse financial position than you were before. I mean, we'll talk about stupid. They're never going to be able to collect that much money from this guy. They wouldn't be able to collect that much money from anybody. And when it finally does see a judge, it'll probably get pled down to a few grand and completely, making this completely pointless. But, it still, I mean, it's pretty eye grabbing number. It will certainly get your attention. It got my attention. And I thought I'd bring the story to you to kind of show you just how ridiculous this whole situation is. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. So in the city where you invest, right, or where you own rental properties, do the code violations, do they continue to accumulate nonstop forever? Okay. And have you ever heard of a $131 million fine from a city? Okay. I mean, this sounds absolutely ridiculous. Some of these properties are probably worth like 100 grand and they have code violations like for $5 million. I mean, what kind of moron would keep doing that kind of stuff, I mean, but anyway, let's get into the story because, I want to read more details about what's going on here. This story is coming from WXXInews.org, and it says, this Rochester landlord owes $131 million in code violations, and the city is suing him to get it. Yeah, the city's trying to come after this guy, but from the sound of the story, this guy's got no money, so they're not going to get anything out of him. Maybe they'll be able to take the properties, but that's about it. Anyway, let's get into it. The city of Rochester has asked a state judge to order an out-of-town real estate investor to pay more than $131 million for code violations at derelict properties he owns. The request is by far the largest judgment sought since the city began more aggressively pursuing neglectful landlords in court a year ago. Citations for rodent infestations, holes in walls, smashed windows, and dilapidated roofs are among the more than 470 violations that have accumulated at 15 single-family homes and apartment houses owned by Meyer Hirschhorn of Rockland County. So yeah, 470 violations at 15 single-family homes. Okay, that's a lot of violations. But I mean, it's not unheard of. But at what point do you just stop saying, okay, well, continuing to find this guy is pointless because this guy won't be able to pay this amount of money. The properties aren't even worth that amount of money, and obviously there's something more going on with this situation. I know that in the cities where I invest, yeah, in some of the really rough neighborhoods, there are houses there that have been sitting empty for years on end, and who knows who the heck owns these places, right? They're in horrible shape. They're just, overgrown, falling apart. Sometimes squatters will move into them, turn them into little drug dens or whatever, right? And, the city confine the landlords if they can find them. They can find the landlords for all the code violations, but what's the point of saying, hey, we're going to just continue to let this amount of money just accumulate against somebody? In some cases, those properties were owned by somebody who passed away, and then whoever the person who inherited the property, they just aren't keeping it up. So what you might end up with is a situation where you have the children of the original owner who suddenly now owe the city millions of dollars. I mean, that doesn't sound like it would end up with a good result at all. But this is idiocy, absolute idiocy by the government of Rochester for even doing this. Okay, so let me continue. Hirschhorn, who has real estate holdings across New York and New Jersey, acknowledged in an interview that the properties in question are in shambles, but said he does not have the money to repair them and anticipated eventually losing them. The properties are collectively valued at $1.2 million on the city's tax roll, less than 1% of what they have amassed in code violation penalties. It doesn't matter to me, Hirschhorn said of the lawsuit. I can't pay the mortgages. I'm not paying a judgment. Wow. This guy, if he can't pay the mortgages, he's absolutely right, right? So here's what will probably happen, right? If the bank doesn't take these properties back because he's unable to pay the mortgages, then the city will take it if he's not able to pay the property taxes and he's not able to pay this huge amount of code violations. The properties are worth about 1.2 million, and it sounds like they're in pretty rough shape as it is. So the city, if they were to take them, probably would just tear the majority of them down because if there's no tenants living in them and the places are more expensive to repair than they're worth, then what's the other option? There isn't one. Okay, let me continue. The litigation is the latest in a string of lawsuits brought by the city's law department in the last year seeking to hold landlords accountable for shoddy conditions at their properties, particularly residential ones. Like the other cases, this one asks a judge to consider imposing the maximum penalty for open code violations, which under city law is $500 per violation per day. But the complaint against Hirschhorn is extraordinary for the size and scope of the violations and potential financial penalties. The lawsuit was filed September 25th in state Supreme Court. A hearing date has not been set. The code violations at Hirschhorn's properties will continue accruing fines until they are remedied. As of September 30th, though, those fines had reached $131,211,500. So basically, for each code violation, they fine the landlord $500 per day until the violation is repaired. And this guy, he has over 470 different violations at these 15 properties, each one accumulating a $500 per day fine for, I don't even know how long. I don't have my calculator with me right now, but this is just the ridiculousness of the whole situation. Okay, these fines, they are not motivating this guy to repair his properties. They probably aren't motivating anybody to repair properties. And that's kind of the reason why I say this is just complete ridiculous, stupid law. They're going after bad landlords, but here's the problem I have, right? Let's say this guy, he is, one of these slumlords, right? Yeah, you want to go after him. But what happens when a good landlord gets caught up in this mess? What happens when overbearing code enforcement inspector comes down to your property, right, which is in very, very good shape that you've been maintaining, but the code inspector looks around, finds one or two violations, right, and he's like, oh well, look at this, his grass is too tall, or oh, the paint is peeling over here, right? And you just wait. You got two violations, right? You wait 2 weeks and you owe this city $14,000, just like that. 14 grand in city fines. See, that's what the problem is. You're a good landlord. You take care of your property, and the code violations are minor, and you only took 2 weeks to repair them, but you owe 14 grand. See, that's the problem with this sort of law. They punish good landlords trying to go after the bad landlords. And the result is, hey, you put us into financial distress and you drive us out of the city. So the good landlords don't want to invest there anymore, and you're just left with all these slumlords. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I wouldn't invest there. I wouldn't invest in New York at all, but that's another story. Anyway, it's an interesting article, interesting situation. $131 million worth of city fines going to this landlord here. It's absolutely ridiculous.